Let's continue with Mr. Raul Rikk. Raul Rikk is our National Cybersecurity Policy Director in Estonia and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communication. The ministry is the leading ministry in the field of cybersecurity. In addition to digital development and cybersecurity, it is also in charge of the policies of trade, energy, construction, transport, media services, well, other areas as well. So everything, basically. Take it away.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone. It's great to be here virtually this time. Hopefully next time we can meet face to face. The COVID crisis is almost over, and we have a joke in Estonia that fortunately the crisis is over. So now we can go back to the 5-meter distance instead of 2 meters that has been demanded by the government so far. But today I will not talk so much about the COVID crisis, but 5G security, because that has been one of the most pressing issues from the beginning of the last year. I was actually asked by the organizers to talk about the main topics related to the national cybersecurity policy development. And just one slide about that as well. We have 3 main topics on the table. One is certainly the 5G security. But in addition to that, we also pay attention to our internet-based voting security and transparency. So there is a lot going on in this area as well. And the third important topic is the new cybersecurity strategy that we will develop this year. Even though the last strategy was finalized 2 years ago, we are renewing our digital development plan in Estonia, and cybersecurity is basically the risk management of the digital development. So that's the reason why we bring the cybersecurity strategy on the table as well. And of course, there is a fourth topic also, that's the COVID crisis related to cybersecurity aspects. But because Estonia has heavily invested to digital development about 20 years, we really didn't felt so strong impact by the COVID-19 situation because we were already digital. So there was nothing new to us. But let's talk about the 5G security because it's not the solved challenge yet. So what is this 5G all about? That slide is for the people who are not working in the telecom or cybersecurity area so much. So as we see from the history, every G has brought something new to the mobile telecommunication. The same way 5G will change the world. It means that we will see more and more IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, all small vacuum cleaners and grass cutters and refrigerators and etc., more and more devices. And most of them will be also or include some artificial intelligence. So we talk about remote robotics as well. So making it short, the 5G makes us even more dependent on telecommunication networks and security as well than ever before. From Estonian perspective, as I already mentioned, we have made our decisions years ago. So for us, maybe the 5G doesn't make the big change because the change has already happened. 99% of our public services are online, including voting, parliament elections, EU parliament elections, and local elections. Our government works without paper, and we declare taxes automatically as well. So these are just 3 examples that depend on the networks. But the bottom line here is that becoming digital means that telecommunication networks are the basic and fundamental infrastructure that we need to protect as much as we can. So what are the challenges related to the 5G security? So the first concern is that it's practically impossible to control 100% the supply chains. and the functions of the hardware and software. So basically, it's very, very hard to say that what the hardware and software does exactly, and whether or not it includes some undocumented functionalities or backdoors, so-called. So that's the first challenge there, how to control the complicated technology. So it means that the security is based on trusting technology suppliers. We have to create this trusted cooperation partnership. Otherwise, there is no way to guarantee the security. And in this game, we have noticed that not all technology providers are not always trustworthy. So there are some technology providers that are considered to being high-risk vendors. And what are the very concrete risks there? I already mentioned the possible backdoors, but in addition to that, the technology dependency as well. So if one technology gains high percentage of the market, it means that the country will depend on this particular technology. And none of the countries certainly wants that. EU has, or actually EU countries together have released several documents about 5G security. Last year, 9th of October, we published the risk assessment. And you can see on the slide that EU together, or EU countries together, pay attention to the strategic risks related to the telecom technology. It means that we don't need to pay attention only to the technical risks, so whether or not the device is secure enough, but also we have to pay attention to the strategic risks related to the trustworthiness of the technology suppliers. And particularly EU countries see that all the technology that comes outside of the EU might include certain risks, strategic risks. And of course, this dependency aspect is mentioned there as well. So what is how does the EU telecom market looks like? We have different technology providers on the market: Ericsson, Nokia, and Huawei. And here we are not talking only about 5G, but the same companies provide technology for 3G, 4G, cable networks, and other technologies. And when we look at particularly the technology that comes outside of the EU, we see that Huawei's market share is growing and the country's dependency increasing in this regard. And if we consider, or some countries or countries consider banning certain technologies, then in Europe it is much, much harder, for example, compared to US, because the European telecom market is very competitive. We have many, many operators. They compete with each other. It means that our prices, telecom prices are, or internet price is low, and also the speed is very high, so the service quality is very good. So if we make changes there, it means automatically that it will influence the telecom service provision as well. So the decisions in Europe, whether or not to allow certain technologies to our market, it's much harder than it might be some other countries. And when we look at the situation, how countries have solved this security challenge, then the US approach is very clear. They have the blacklist of high-risk suppliers. They basically add certain companies there. So they list the companies who are not allowed to operate on US market. In Europe, it is not so simple. So because of that, several countries like France, Sweden, and now also Estonia have improved their legislation the way that there is a possibility to exclude or restrict high-risk suppliers. And very shortly, what kind of approach we are considering to take, or we have already taken, is that our parliament made a amendment to the electronic communications law this month, 12th of May. So it means that according to the electronic communications law, our government is able to implement the approval procedure or the notification procedure. It means that in certain cases, the government of Estonia can ask companies to get approval first by the government whether or not to use certain technologies in the network. And also in some other cases where the risk is lower, notification procedure of the use of technology is sufficient. So that's in the law. And now, according to the law, the government must agree on a new regulation that specifies more specifically how these two procedures will be implemented. So basically, to conclude my short presentation, the 5G security is one of the most pressing cybersecurity policy topics, and we work very hard in order to create these new regulations before we hand out frequencies for 5G technologies. So that's very shortly about national cybersecurity policy development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will have time to talk to you later in the panel as well. I do have one more question before you go. You talked about keeping some of these products off the market, so to speak, in the European way and in the United States. If we do expand this to consumer protection and consumer products, for example, a lot of questions in this time of working from home, studying from home, have come about which platforms are safe, which platforms are good. If we, as a state, can deem a car unsafe for the road, should we as a state tell teachers which video conference platforms they can use or which ones to talk to their relatives with, whether we can ban some phones or internet connected refrigerators from sale, which may be prone to actually becoming part of a botnet and attacking some, is this something that we should be pursuing in terms of consumer protection?
Yes, that's a very good question. And of course, the answer is not so easy because that's a relevant consideration, that how to make sure that the products that we have on the market are cyber secure enough. And exactly for that reason, European Union has started the process of the cyber security certification. So we are developing a scheme how to make sure that certain products are secure enough, and that will come in coming years. So that's a good news, I would say.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this. And we will continue with our webinar.